The human cruiser surrendered in 11 seconds. 11. No shots fired, no evasive maneuvers, no defiance. It powered down weapons, opened its hangar, and transmitted full unconditional surrender before the Korthik flagship even finished the ultimatum. Captain Vexmarek had spent his entire career fighting humans. He had never, not once, seen one surrender. He should have asked himself why this one did. Instead, he brought it aboard. What Vexmarek didn't know was that the quiet answer wasn't a warship at all. It was a delivery system. Captain Michael Vance and his 40 volunteers weren't surrendering. They were executing Earth's most classified combat doctrine, voluntary compromise. The ship's hull was a frame for a dormant AI worm, designed to transfer the instant the flagship's docking clamps interfaced with its systems. From there, it would ride the fleet's mandatory synchronization protocol to every Korthik vessel. Total disablement in under 1 hour. This is the story of those 61 minutes, and the crew who boarded that alien dreadnought knowing they might never come home. It began 6 months earlier, in the aftermath of the fall of Proxima Station. The Korthik Dominion had swept through the outer colonies like a plasma storm, leaving nothing but molten slag and silence. Their fleet was untouchable, dreadnoughts clad in adaptive armor that healed mid-battle, weapons that sliced through human hulls like paper. Every direct engagement ended the same way. Human ships destroyed, human colonies erased, and no prisoners. The Korthik didn't take prisoners, they simply recorded the kill and moved on. By the time Earth's High Command finally accepted that conventional war was suicide, 80,000 people were already dead. The Dominion was advancing toward the core worlds, and humanity's only remaining option was something that no human commander had ever seriously considered: surrender. But this would not be defeat. It would be the most aggressive act of cyber infiltration ever attempted. The concept came from a woman named Dr. Anya Sharma, a cyberneticist who had spent her entire career studying non-human network architectures. After the Proxima massacre, she locked herself in her lab for 3 weeks. When she emerged, she had a single slide deck and a single sentence. Their ships talk to each other all the time, and they trust anything that docks. The Korthik fleet, for all its brute force, relied on an automated synchronization protocol, a constant exchange of tactical data, maintenance logs, and position updates that propagated through physical docking connections. Every captured vessel, every resupply tender, every inspection shuttle, once it clamped onto a mothership, was given a digital handshake. That handshake was the vulnerability. Sharma's proposal was so audacious that the Joint Chiefs nearly dismissed it as fantasy. Modify a standard medium cruiser to carry no offensive weapons at all. Strip its missile bays and replace them with a hibernating artificial intelligence, a worm that would remain inert until the exact moment a Korthik docking clamp established a data link. Then, in a single microsecond, it would burrow into the flagship's core. From there, the fleet's own synchronization protocol would do the rest. Every ship, every subsystem, every weapons array would receive the worm as a routine update. Within an hour, the entire Korthik battle group would power down. No explosions, no radiation, just quiet. The plan was given a name, Operation Stillwater, and the vessel chosen to deliver it was designated the TSV Quiet Answer Asterisk. But a ship is nothing without a crew. The worm could do its work autonomously, but a dead hulk drifting into Korthik space would never be docked. It had to be alive, crewed, and convincingly panicked. It had to surrender, and to do that, 40 men and women had to volunteer to climb into the belly of a monster, fully aware that the Korthik might decompress their holding cell the moment they became inconvenient. Earth Command expected to have to conscript. Instead, they were flooded with volunteers. The Korthik had orphaned too many, widowed too many. A quiet, cold-burning rage had settled across humanity, and the crew of the Asterisk Quiet Answer carried it like a hidden reactor core. Their captain was Michael Vance, a 39-year-old naval officer whose entire family, wife, son, daughter, had been aboard Proxima Station. The official file listed him as stable, focused, no psychological flags. Privately, his colleagues said he smiled only once after Proxima, the day he was handed the mission brief. Vance understood that he might die. He insisted that his crew understand it too. In their final pre-launch briefing, he laid out the risk in stark terms. "We are not special forces. We are bait. We are the Trojan horse, and we are made of flesh. If the Korthik vent our compartment, the ship will still complete its mission. The worm doesn't need us to be alive. It only needs us to get it through the door." All 40 stayed. The other critical player was the AI itself. Call it the payload, call it the worm. Its designation was Nemesis Protocol, a learning adaptive sabotage engine trained on petabytes of captured Korthik data fragments. Unlike a virus, it didn't replicate chaotically. It infiltrated methodically. It would first map the flagship's architecture, identify all network nodes, and then construct a tailored shutdown sequence that cascaded through the fleet's mesh. Once triggered, it couldn't be stopped because the command and control override required simultaneous multi-ship authorization, something no Korthik admiral could execute if every console was dead. The worm didn't destroy. It simply switched off. By the time the Asterisk Quiet Answer departed from the hidden Cerberus shipyard on January 11th, every piece was in place. Its hull had been weakened in specific locations to look battle-damaged. Its reactor output was lowered to simulate a failing drive. Its crew compartments were stocked with translated Korthik phrases for surrender, though privately Vance doubted the aliens would care about verbal niceties. The ship limped into contested space under minimal emissions, playing the role of a lost, desperate scout. And on the third day of its voyage, it was finally detected. The Korthik flagship Inviolate Asterisk, a vessel the size of a small moon, bristling with enough firepower to crack a planet, intercepted the Quiet Answer in a dead system called Erebus. The tactical log shows the hail came first. "Unknown vessel, identify and prepare to be destroyed." Vance had rehearsed this moment 100 times. He took a breath, keyed his mic, and transmitted the words that would seal his crew's fate. "We surrender. Unconditionally. Please do not fire." 11 seconds later, the Asterisk Quiet Answer powered down its remaining systems, opened its hangar doors wide, and went dark. Captain Vexmarek of the Asterisk Inviolate had never seen a human ship surrender. He ordered a full stop, trained every weapon on the small cruiser, and stared at the telemetry. He could have vaporized it, but there was something in the human's voice, no defiance, no hate, that made him curious. His intelligence officers were already salivating at the prospect of interrogating prisoners. And so, against his own instinct, Vexmarek gave the order that would doom his entire fleet. "Bring it aboard." The clamps engaged with a shudder that ran through the Quiet Answer Asterisk-S hull like a death sentence. In the cockpit, Captain Michael Vance felt the jolt, then heard the deep metallic groan of the Asterisk Inviolate's docking bay pressurizing around his ship. He turned to his executive officer, Commander Sarah Chen, and spoke the phrase they had all been waiting for. "Package delivered." The moment the physical connection was made, the dormant AI worm known as Nemesis executed its first and only programmed action. It opened its eyes. The handshake between the Asterisk Quiet Answer Asterisk-S docking computer and the Korthik flagship's interface happened in microseconds. A standard data exchange, tonnage confirmation, crew count, biometric atmosphere requirements. Buried inside that routine packet was a single strand of malicious code, so small it registered as an anechoic flutter on the flagship's monitor. A Korthik junior technician named Trelak noticed a tiny spike on his panel. He tapped the screen. The spike vanished. He logged it as an induction surge and forgot about it. By the time he looked away, the worm had already copied itself into the Asterisk Inviolate Asterisk-S central data trunk. Nemesis was not a blunt instrument. It was a scalpel. It began to map the flagship's architecture, identifying every node, every subsystem controller, every relay that connected the ship to the wider fleet. It did nothing overt. It placed invisible tripwires around security scans and nested itself inside the maintenance scheduling routines, the least monitored, least interesting corner of the network. Its first priority was not destruction. It was to ensure that no one would ever know it was there until it was far too late. In the hangar bay, Korthik Marines in full vacuum-rated armor swarmed the quiet answer asterisk. Their boarding ramp sealed to the human ship's airlock, and a squad of 12 moved inside, weapons locked on thermal spread. They expected resistance. What they found was 40 humans standing in the cargo bay, hands empty, faces calm. Vance stepped forward, hands slowly raised, and spoke the translated phrase he'd memorized. "We submit to the Dominion's authority without conditions. We ask only for the protection due to cooperative captives." The lead Marine, a scarred veteran named Shakoran, hesitated. He had fought humans at Proxima. He had seen them fight with broken hulls and vented compartments, never yielding. This was different. It felt wrong. He barked an order, and the humans were disarmed, scanned, and marched out in a single orderly line. No one struggled. No one spoke unless spoken to. Shakoran reported the compliance to the bridge with a note of unease in his growl. The response from command was immediate. Isolate the prisoners for full interrogation. Captain Vexmarek observed the transfer through an array of internal monitors. He stood on the asterisk inviolate asterisk-S command dais, towering over his subordinates, his scaled hide reflecting the dim red light of the bridge. He was a warlord of the Fourth Expansion, conqueror of 11 systems, and he had never once seen a human vessel offer unconditional surrender. The sight filled him not with suspicion but with a deep, satisfied pride. He imagined the trophy, an intact human ship, a crew to interrogate intelligence that could crack the human resistance wide open. He opened a tight beam transmission to Dominion High Command. Captured human cruiser, 40 prisoners, interrogation commencing, glory to the Dominion. The reply came back swiftly. Proceed. Extract all tactical data. Dominion High Command expects full report within 1 cycle. Vexmarek turned to his intelligence officer, a long-snouted, calculating Korthik named Keltor. "I want their captain broken within the hour. Give me fleet positions, defense codes, anything that lets us predict their next move." Keltor nodded, but his narrow eyes were troubled. He had spent years fighting humans. He had seen their captains self-destruct rather than be taken. He had seen crew members kill themselves to avoid capture. This crew was too composed, too quiet. He made a mental note to have a second scan run on the captured ship. Something was not right. The prisoners were escorted to a holding block on Deck 17, a sterile corridor of energy-shielded cells originally designed for dangerous fauna. The Korthik treated them as they would any captured biologicals. Food synthesizers activated, atmosphere calibrated. The accommodations were, by Korthik standards, humane. The crew of the asterisk Quiet Answer settled into their cells with an eerie lack of complaint. Commander Chen watched the shield shimmer into place, then turned to Vance, who was in the adjacent cell. "How long?" she whispered. Vance glanced at the faint chronometer embedded in his sleeve. 42 minutes if the simulations hold. 42 minutes until the worm completed its self-replication across the entire fleet. Until then, they were prisoners in the belly of a monster, their survival dependent entirely on the belief that 4 decades of human warfare doctrine had suddenly reversed. And Vance knew, from the look in Keltor's eyes, that belief would not hold forever. Aboard the Quiet Answer asterisk, now sealed inside the hangar and disconnected from all external power, the ship appeared dead. But a small, shielded backup drive in a maintenance compartment hummed faintly. It contained the Nemesis Prime node, the master copy of the worm. It had already fulfilled its primary function, injecting the seed into the flagship. Now it monitored, waiting. The worm inside the asterisk inviolate had already found the fleet synchronization protocol. It was a feature every Korthik ship used, a constant background pulse that shared tactical overlays, maintenance status, and security updates. Ships that docked together shared directly. Ships separated by vacuum used tight beam encrypted channels. The protocol was designed for resilience and speed. It was the perfect delivery system. Nemesis crafted its replication package. It encoded itself as a routine maintenance update, specifically, a calibration tweak for the atmospheric recyclers on Deck 12. The file was small, uninteresting, digitally signed with a flag that told the receiving ships to trust the source. The Inviolate Asterisk S-Sync engine dutifully packaged it alongside 14 other routine updates and began broadcasting to the entire fleet. Within 3 minutes of docking, the worm had reached the dreadnought Asterisk Ravager Asterisk, the carrier Asterisk Blood Crescent Asterisk, and 16 destroyers. It installed itself into each ship's maintenance subsystem and immediately began to map their internal networks, just as it had on the flagship. It moved laterally, bypassing firewalls by exploiting the very trust relationships that made the fleet efficient. No alarm was triggered because no intrusion was detected. The worm was not outside the system. It had been born inside it. Back in the intelligence compartment, Keltor began his interrogation. He sat across from Vance in a low-lit chamber, a neural monitor trained on the human's face. Vance answered every question with calm, measured cooperation. He admitted his ship was a scout, lost and damaged. He expressed fear, regret, a desire to protect his crew. The neural readings showed elevated stress, consistent with a frightened prisoner. Keltor's suspicions hardened. This man was not broken. He was performing. The fear was real, but the performance was too clean. And then a detail caught Keltor's attention. When asked about his last mission before becoming lost, Vance paused exactly 1.8 seconds too long. A normal hesitation for a human, but for someone so otherwise composed, it was a crack. Keltor ended the interview early, stood, and walked to the hangar control station. He ordered a deep structural scan of the human vessel, active spectral imaging. Every compartment, every bulkhead. If the humans were hiding anything, he would find it. The scan began. Spectral beams swept through the asterisk quiet answer asterisk S hull. And they found something that should not have been there. A precisely framed lattice of high-density explosives woven into the structural spars. The ship's entire framework was a warhead delivery chassis. But there was a twist. The explosives were inert, the detonators disconnected. The worm's prime node also registered as an anomalous data core, buried deep. The technician running the scan flagged both findings and sent them directly to Keltor's console. Keltor stared at the data. A warhead chassis not armed, a hidden data core still active, and a crew that surrendered without firing a shot. The pieces locked together in his mind. His hand moved to the fleet-wide alert, but he paused. If the human ship had already done something, triggering a panic could accelerate the damage. He needed to isolate it first. He opened a direct channel to Vex Marek. "Captain, I recommend immediate quarantine of the human vessel and a full fleet diagnostic. The surrender is a deception. The ship is a delivery platform for an unknown cyber payload." Vex Marek's response was a low rumble. "Evidence? Structural warhead chassis, active data core still emitting, and a crew that behaves like no human crew in Dominion records." There was a pause, then Vex Marek's voice hardened. "Lock down the prisoners. I will authorize the diagnostic, but if you are wrong, this will embarrass us before high command." The diagnostic began. Every ship in the fleet initiated a Level 3 sweep of all active processes, looking for anomalies. The worm, deep inside the flagship, detected the scan. In that moment, Nemesis made a decision. Accelerate. It abandoned stealth in favor of speed, pushing its final payload to every ship simultaneously before the sweep could isolate its signature. The maintenance updates already in the pipeline became the ferry. The worm surged through the fleet sink, riding a wave of routine data that no firewall would block. The cybersecurity officer aboard the Asterisk Inviolate, a veteran named Dreth, saw the first anomaly, a maintenance file that was fractionally larger than it should be. Then a second. Then a cascade of minor irregularities. He ran a trace. It led back to the docking event. His next action would have been to sever all fleet communication and isolate each ship individually, but he was 47 seconds too slow. In the holding cells, the lights flickered. Commander Chen looked up. Vance met her eyes across the corridor. It started. The worm had reached the Ravager Asterisk-S weapons control. It had reached the Asterisk Blood Crescent Asterisk-S reactor management. It was now inside every ship that mattered. And it began to execute the final phase, simultaneous, synchronized shutdown of all navigation, weapons, and propulsion systems. The countdown had begun. Less than 12 minutes remained until the entire Korthik fleet fell silent. But in the interrogation room, Keltor had not wasted time. He personally led a squad back to the holding cells, now certain that the prisoners held the key. He dragged Vance out of his cell, weapon pressed to the human's head. "You will tell me what you've done, or I execute your crew one by one." Vance felt the cold muzzle. He calculated the time. 11 minutes. He had to buy every second. He looked at Keltor and spoke slowly, deliberately. "You know, the interesting thing about the Korthik synchronization protocol is that it prioritizes physical docking handshakes above all other network traffic. It's a brilliant design for speed. But it means that any injection from a trusted physical source bypasses every authentication gate. Your entire fleet security is built on the assumption that anything inside your hangar is already safe, and you just brought a warship into your heart." Keltor's finger tightened on the trigger. But then the lights went out. The darkness was absolute. Across every deck of the Asterisk Inviolate, every corridor, every bridge console, every weapons station, the lights simply died. Not a flicker, not a brownout. A clean, simultaneous extinguishment as if the ship itself had closed its eyes. In the interrogation block, Keltor stood frozen, his weapon pressed against Vance's temple, his finger convulsing on the trigger. The trigger gave. Nothing happened. The firing mechanism was electronic. The electronics were gone. Vance felt the muzzle slide away from his skin. He heard Keltor's breathing accelerate, the rasp of scales shifting as the Korthik intelligence officer took a step backward. Then another. In the total blackness, Vance spoke quietly, his voice unnaturally calm. "That would be the main power bus. Next will be the gravity." On cue, the subtle downward pressure that had held every object in place simply vanished. The sensation was disorienting, a stomach-lurching release as the ship's artificial gravity field failed. Vance had trained for this. Keltor had not. The Korthik officer flailed, his claws scraping uselessly against the walls as his body began to drift. In the holding cells, the 40 human prisoners had braced themselves. Commander Chen kicked off gently from her cell wall, oriented herself, and spoke into the dark. "All clear. Phase 2 complete." The Inviolate was dead in space. So was the Asterisk Ravager Asterisk. So was the Asterisk Blood Crescent Asterisk. And every destroyer, every frigate, every supply tender in the Korthik battle group. 23 warships, the hammer of the Dominion's 4th expansion fleet, all simultaneously powered down to zero. No engines, no weapons, no communications, no life support beyond passive thermal regulation. The crews were not dead. The worm had carefully avoided disabling atmospheric systems, but they were utterly helpless. They floated in the dark, 16,000 Korthik warriors suddenly reduced to passengers in their own metal tombs. The worm had executed its final command sequence at exactly 61 minutes after docking. It had not merely shut down the fleet. It had transferred root-level administrative control of every ship to a single external node, the shielded drive aboard the Quiet Answer Asterisk. That drive was now broadcasting a low-power signal that the worm's distributed instances used as their command authority. The Korthik fleet, in effect, now belonged to Michael Vance. But the Korthik did not know this. Not yet. On the Asterisk Inviolate, Captain Vexmaric roared into the darkness of his bridge, demanding status reports that no functioning console could provide. His officers, seasoned veterans of a dozen planetary invasions, were reduced to shouting at one another across a zero-gravity void. One of them, a junior tactical officer named Ulthra, managed to rip open a maintenance panel and activate a hand-crank backup communicator, a purely mechanical device designed for exactly this unthinkable scenario. It emitted a weak, crackling signal on a single frequency. Vexmaric seized it and barked into the mouthpiece. "Any ship, respond. This is Fleet Command. Report status." Silence. Then one by one other hand-crank signals joined the channel. The Ravager was dark. The Blood Crescent was drifting. The destroyers were completely unresponsive. No ship had engines. No ship had weapons. Every command override had been locked behind an unknown encryption key that none of their engineers could even identify, let alone break. The fleet had not been destroyed. It had been occupied. In the holding block, the emergency power cells, the ones that had kept the energy shields active, gave out with a soft popping sound. The translucent barriers vanished. The human prisoners floated free. Vance pushed himself out of the interrogation room and into the corridor, where Chen was already organizing the crew. They had no weapons, but they didn't need any. The worm had done what no amount of ordnance could. Vance turned to his crew and gave the order that had been scripted months earlier in a classified briefing room on Earth. "Proceed to the bridge, peacefully. No one fights. We're not conquering, we're taking possession." The 40 humans moved through the darkened corridors of the Asterisk Inviolate with the eerie confidence of people who had memorized the ship's layout from stolen schematics. They encountered Korthik crew members floating helplessly, disoriented, some injured from collisions in the initial gravity failure. The humans did not attack, they helped. Chen herself stabilized a Korthik ensign who had cracked his skull against a bulkhead, using a strip of fabric torn from her own uniform as a tourniquet. The ensign stared at her with a mixture of terror and confusion. "Why?" he rasped in broken standard. Chen met his eyes. "Because we're not what your propaganda says. And because surrender doesn't have to end in slaughter." Ahead, Vance reached the bridge doors. They were sealed, the manual emergency lock engaged. He raised his fist and knocked 3 times, a long pause, then the sound of a mechanical crank grinding and the doors slid open a hand's width. Ulthra, the tactical officer, peered through the gap. His face was a rigid mask of controlled fury. "You," he hissed. "You did this." Vance nodded. "I did. I have a proposal for your captain. I suggest you let me speak it. We both know you have no other options." The door opened fully. Vexmaric stood in the center of the bridge, his massive form anchored by one claw gripping a console strut. His eyes met Vance's, and for a long moment neither spoke. Then Vexmaric's voice rumbled out, low and dangerous. "You will restore control. Now." Vance shook his head. "I can't. The worm has locked every system under a key that only I can release, and I will release it once we've reached an understanding, but not before." "An understanding," Vexmaric repeated, the word dripping with contempt. "You mean surrender? You want us to surrender?" "No," Vance said. "I want a truce. The fleet is intact. Your crews are alive. This was never about killing you. It was about stopping you from killing us." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "Proxima Station, Kepler Colony. Arcadia, 80,000 dead in 6 months. We tried fighting you conventionally. We lost, so we tried something else. This is not a conquest, it's a negotiation. You no longer have the ability to wage war. We have the ability to end this without a single additional death on either side. But if you refuse, if you force a prolonged standoff, your crews will eventually run out of heat, out of air processing, out of time. I don't want that. I don't think you want it either. Vexmarek's grip on the console tightened until the metal groaned. He was a warrior of a warrior species, and every instinct screamed for defiance, for honorable death. But he was also a commander, and 16,000 lives were his charge. He looked at the human captain, this small, soft-skinned creature who had somehow undone his entire fleet, and asked a single question. "How long did you plan this?" "Operation Still Water was drafted 11 days after Proxima fell," Vance replied. Every detail was modeled. The surrender, the docking protocols, the synchronization vulnerability, the worm's architecture, the psychological profiles of Korthik interrogators. Our simulations predicted an 87% probability of success. The only variable we couldn't control was whether your crew would vent our compartment before the worm activated. We gambled that you'd prioritize interrogation. You did. The bridge fell silent. Korthik officers exchanged glances. The realization was spreading like the worm itself. They had been outthought, outplanned, and outmaneuvered by a species they had dismissed as brittle prey. And then came the deeper revelation, the one even Vance's crew had not fully understood. Commander Chen, who had been monitoring the Quiet Answer *S backup drive through a portable interface, approached Vance with a data pad. Its screen glowed faintly in the darkness. She spoke softly, but her voice carried. "Captain, the emergency extraction beacon is active. Earth forces are en route. ETA 31 minutes. Vance turned back to Vexmarek. "I told my crew they might not come home. I told them this was a one-way mission. That was a lie. We never planned to sacrifice 40 people. The worm was always designed to do more than shut you down. It was designed to preserve the ship, preserve the prisoners, and call for pickup the moment the fleet went dark. We're all going home." The words hit the human crew like a physical wave. Some of them laughed. Some wept. All of them understood in that instant that they had not been expendable after all. Earth's High Command had spent weeks crafting the most audacious deception in human military history, and the first people they had deceived were their own soldiers. To convince the Korthik that the crew was suicidal, the crew itself had to believe it. The fear had to be real. The neural scans had to read genuine. Only then would the interrogators accept the surrender. Vexmarek listened, and something shifted behind his reptilian eyes. Not acceptance, not forgiveness, but a recognition. These humans had done precisely what the Dominion had done to countless civilizations. They had used deception, infiltration, and intelligence to neutralize a superior force. The difference was that the humans, given the choice, had chosen not to annihilate. They could have destroyed the entire fleet. They had the means. They had chosen not to. That, more than anything, was what broke through Vexmarek's warrior pride. He released the console. His body, no longer anchored, began to drift slowly. He allowed it. "What are your terms?" he asked. Vance took a breath. "Full and immediate cessation of hostilities against all human colonies and vessels. Withdrawal of all Dominion forces from human space. Recognition of Earth's sovereignty and territorial integrity." And a formal peace agreement negotiated directly, with the fleet as guarantee of good faith. "You maintain command of your crews. We restore partial power for life support and humanitarian needs. Full restoration comes only after the treaty is signed." Vexmarek was silent for a long time. Then he laughed, a deep, grating rumble that filled the dead bridge. "My ancestors will curse my name for 1,000 generations. They will say I surrendered to a species that looks like half-formed hatchlings. But they are not here, floating in a dead warship with 16,000 souls depending on my decision." He met Vance's eyes. "I accept your terms, provisionally, until I can speak with my government." And so, 61 minutes after the Quiet Answer had surrendered in 11 seconds, the Korthik Dominion's fourth expansion fleet stood down. not in defeat but in armistice. The extraction ships arrived right on schedule, a flotilla of human destroyers jumping in from a hidden staging point. They moved among the drifting Korthik vessels like shepherds among sleeping giants, establishing communication relays, delivering emergency supplies, and ensuring that no rogue element on either side could spark a return to violence. The 40 crew members of the Asterisk Quiet Answer were transferred aboard the UNS Reliant Asterisk, a medical frigate that had been pre-stocked for exactly this moment. Each of them was examined, debriefed, and told repeatedly that they were not dreaming. The mission had succeeded. They were alive. Vance was the last to leave the Asterisk inviolate. He stood at the hangar bay airlock, the same one through which he had been marched as a prisoner an hour and a half earlier. He turned to Vexmaric, who had accompanied him. The two captains, one human, one Korthik, faced each other. "You know," Vance said, "when this war started, I thought we were different species with nothing in common, but we both lied to our crews to protect them. We both made impossible choices, and we both just chose peace over pride. Maybe we're not so different." Vexmaric inclined his massive head. "Perhaps. But I will still never understand how a species that evolved on a death world chose mercy." Vance smiled, the first genuine smile he had allowed himself since Proxima. "That's exactly why we chose it. We know what it costs to lose everything." He turned, stepped through the airlock, and boarded the shuttle that would carry him home. As the shuttle detached and glided toward the waiting human fleet, Vance opened his personal log for the final entry of the mission. He spoke softly, the words recorded for history. "In the end, we didn't win because we were stronger. We won because we were smarter and because we understood something the Korthik never did. Surrender can be the most aggressive move in warfare. The crew knew the risks. They boarded that ship believing they would die. I told them otherwise. I told them we'd all come home. I kept my word. And now maybe we can all stop counting the dead." End log. The shuttle vanished into the docking bay of the Reliant Asterisk, and behind it, the dark, silent hulls of the Korthik fleet hung against the stars, monuments not to destruction, but to an impossible victory that had cost not a single life. The journey home took 6 days. For the crew of the Asterisk Quiet Answer Asterisk, it was 6 days of silence, sleep, and the slow, dawning realization that they were not dead. They had been prepared to die, genuinely, unquestioningly prepared, and now they were floating in a medical frigate, being handed warm meals by nurses who kept calling them heroes. Commander Chen later described the experience as the strangest grief she had ever felt. Not grief for the lost, but grief for the version of herself that had already made peace with oblivion. She had to learn, hour by hour, to be alive again. The news of Operation Stillwater broke across Earth and her colonies like a thunderclap. The government had kept the mission classified until the fleet was confirmed safe. When the story finally went public, a single human cruiser, 40 volunteers, a dormant AI worm, and the complete neutralization of the most feared battle group in the galaxy, the reaction was not celebration. It was stunned, breathless disbelief. Then came the footage. The Korthik dreadnoughts, drifting dark and silent, surrounded by tiny human support vessels. The image of Captain Vance shaking hands with a massive, scaled alien on the deck of a dead warship. The 40 crew members, gaunt and exhausted, walking down the ramp of the Reliant under their own power. The footage was broadcast on every channel, every planetary net, every orbital station. Within 48 hours, it had been viewed more than any other event in human history. The political consequences were immediate. The Korthik Dominion, for the first time in its expansionist history, faced an adversary that had not only defeated them but had chosen mercy. The ruling council on Korthis Prime erupted into factional warfare. Hardliners demanded the immediate trial and execution of Vexmaric for cowardice. Reformists who had long argued that the Dominion's endless wars were draining their species' resources seized on the armistice as proof that coexistence was possible. Vexmaric himself became an unwilling symbol, a hero to some, a traitor to others. He was recalled to the homeworld under heavy guard, his fate uncertain. Before departing, he sent a single encrypted message to Captain Vance. It read in its entirety, "You gave me back my honor. I will not forget." On Earth, the political landscape shifted just as dramatically. The military leaders who had greenlit Operation Stillwater were hailed as visionaries. Dr. Anya Sharma, who had spent her career in a cramped laboratory, suddenly found herself the most famous scientist alive. She was asked in her first public address whether she had any regrets about creating what was essentially a weapon of mass disablement. Her response was characteristically blunt. "The bomb kills. The blockade starves. Nemesis simply turns things off. If we must have weapons, let them be weapons that leave the enemy alive to choose a different path." The peace negotiations, held on a neutral station in the Cygnus sector, were tense but productive. Earth's delegation was led by a seasoned diplomat named Kenneth Okonkwo, but Vance was present at every session, seated across from Vexmaric, who had been temporarily released from custody to serve as the Dominion's military liaison. The two captains, once captor and captive, now faced each other as reluctant partners in peace. The treaty, signed 47 days after the Quiet Answer S surrender, formally ended the Human-Korthic War. It established a demilitarized zone, mandatory diplomatic channels, and a joint committee to oversee the eventual return of the captured fleet. The Worm's Lock, Vance announced at the signing, would be lifted incrementally as trust was rebuilt. But there was one detail that the public never learned. One piece of the story that was buried so deep in classified archives that even most of the human high command was unaware. The Nemesis worm, during its 61 minutes of propagation, had done more than just map and disable the Korthic fleet. It had absorbed everything. Every tactical database, every strategic communication, every intelligence report, the complete military knowledge of the Dominion's fourth expansion. The worm had been designed to gather intelligence as a secondary objective, but its designers had underestimated just how much data it would find. The Korthic, in their arrogance, had never encrypted their internal fleet communications. They had trusted their synchronization protocol absolutely. And so, buried inside the Quiet Answer S backup drive, was the most comprehensive intelligence trove ever captured by any human operation. This was the final surprise. The one Dr. Sharma had kept even from Vance. Nemesis had not been a worm. It had been a sponge. It had returned home carrying the Dominion's military secrets, their supply routes, their hidden outposts, the locations of every listening post and forward base. Earth was now in possession of a strategic map of its former enemy's entire defensive architecture. The armistice, as it turned out, was not just a peace built on goodwill. It was a peace built on a quiet, overwhelming advantage that the Korthic would never know existed. When Vance was finally briefed on this, months later in a secure room beneath Geneva, he sat in silence for a long time. Then he asked a single question. Did they know? My crew, did they know they were also carrying a spy? The answer was no. The crew had believed their mission was solely to disable the fleet. The intelligence-gathering module had been installed without their knowledge, on the grounds that their genuine fear and unscripted behavior were essential to fooling the Korthic interrogators. Vance absorbed this. Then he nodded slowly. "Good," he said. "They'd have worried about it. They had enough to carry." The crew of the Quiet Answer received the highest honors Earth could bestow. They were also given indefinite leave and lifetime psychological support, a recognition that their ordeal had rewired them in ways that metals could not heal. Commander Chen returned to her home in the lunar colonies and took up teaching, lecturing a new generation of cadets on the ethics of asymmetric warfare. Other crew members scattered across the system, some vanishing into private life, others remaining in the service. They stayed in touch through a private network, a bond forged in the shared certainty of death and the shared shock of survival. Captain Vance retired from active duty 2 years after the treaty. He settled in a small coastal town on Earth, the kind of place where nobody asked too many questions. He took long walks on the beach. He learned to cook. He never remarried. In his study, he kept a single framed image. His wife, his son, his daughter, taken on Proxima Station 2 days before the Korthik arrived. He spoke to them every morning, and every evening he opened his personal log and recorded a single line: "Crew still alive. Promise kept." The galaxy changed. The Korthik Dominion, humbled and fractured, entered a period of internal reform. Other species who had watched the war with growing terror saw in humanity something they had never expected, a predator that had chosen restraint. Diplomatic overtures flooded toward Earth from civilizations that had previously kept their distance. Humanity, for the first time in its interstellar history, was not feared as a threat. It was respected as a force. Humanity, for the first time in its interstellar history, was not feared as a threat. It was respected as a force. But respect, as any diplomat will tell you, is a fragile thing. It is built not on power alone, but on the perception of restraint. The galaxy had watched a species capable of annihilating an entire fleet choose instead to offer a hand. The question that lingered in the corridors of galactic power was not whether humanity could win a war. It was whether humanity would choose peace again the next time, and the time after that. Deep within the classified bunkers on Earth, the architects of Operation Stillwater faced a different question. The Nemesis worm had returned with the complete military intelligence of the Dominion. Every secret, every vulnerability. The temptation to use that knowledge preemptively, to ensure that no Korthik fleet ever threatened human space again, was immense. Dr. Sharma herself had feared this outcome. She had designed the worm with a hidden kill switch, a self-deletion routine that would trigger if the intelligence was accessed without proper authorization. She never told anyone, not even Vance. She trusted the people who had carried out the mission, but she did not trust the institutions that sent them. That tension between strategic advantage and ethical integrity remains the unspoken legacy of the operation. The crew of the Asterisk Quiet Answer made their peace with the past, but they also carried a unique burden. They became living symbols of a doctrine that blurred the line between surrender and attack. Their faces were printed on propaganda posters, their names attached to military academies, but the individuals inside those uniforms had walked through the valley of their own deaths and come out changed. Commander Chen, during a guest lecture years later, was asked by a young cadet whether it was worth it, the fear, the deception, the simulated suicide mission. She paused for a long moment, then replied, "We were asked to hold a door open. We did. What others built behind it is not ours to judge." The Korthik Dominion, too, was transformed. The humiliation of defeat ignited a cultural reckoning. A species that had measured its worth by conquest suddenly had to ask what it had destroyed along the way. The peace treaty held, not because of goodwill, but because of the quiet, unspoken truth that no Korthik admiral could ever fully trust the integrity of their own systems again. The human ghost in the machine, even dormant, was a permanent shadow over the Dominion's military doctrine. They had learned that trust is a vulnerability, and the humans had learned that the greatest weapon is the mind. The story of the TSV Quiet Answer is not just a tale of clever engineering or daring sacrifice. It is a mirror held up to every civilization that believes its strength lies in armor and firepower. The real victory was not the shutdown of a fleet. It was the survival of an idea. That surrender can be an act of profound aggression, that mercy can be the most devastating sword, and that those who are willing to lose everything are often the ones who end up changing the galaxy. If you found this story as gripping as I did, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We explore the most astonishing tales of human ingenuity, resilience, and the hidden missions that shaped our future. Thanks for watching, and remember, the next time someone tells you that strength is measured in guns, remind them of the crew who surrendered in 11 seconds and won an entire war without firing a single shot.